Now, I want us to start to look at stress. Okay. So this is what's known as the human performance curve. And it's really important that we do have an understanding of this. So in terms of work and the stuff that we're doing within our jobs, okay, if we were at the bottom part of it where we're bored, okay, and there's nothing to do, right, it would be, in terms of performance, very low. Like we don't choose the jobs we choose because there's nothing to do. We choose it because we want to help and make a difference and, doing things, learning things, growing and developing. Yeah. So we have to have some type of stress. Okay. And there is an optimum performance for stress. Like stress in itself is not a bad thing. When you know that there is a task that you need to complete or you've got to work towards something, it actually helps you to feel energized, focused, and work feels less, more or effortless, and you're engaging in this process and you feel good. But there is a peak to that. Okay. And so, in terms of performance, we want to kind of stay at that peak where we're kind of learning, growing, and getting better. But then what happens is if we go past that point, or if the stress becomes too much, then it becomes de-stress. Okay. And that's when the fatigue, the exhaustion, the ill health, the breakdown, and the burnout happens. So I just want us to understand, before we go into stress, to understand that stress in itself is not a bad thing. Too much stress is a bad thing. And so the warning signs of stress. Okay. So when we're looking at it in terms of the mind, it's the excessive worrying. It's the constantly thinking and ruminating over certain thoughts, over things that you can't control. It's the muddled thinking. So it's what I call the brain fog thinking, where you can't see clearly, where you're not, you're thinking about something and you lose your trail of thought because these other intruding thoughts keep coming into your mind. It's the impaired judgment. So your judgment is, you're not making right judgments and clear judgments, and you make these decisions and afterwards think, why did I do that? Then you can have the nightmares. The nightmares often are the manifestation of what you have been thinking about before you go to bed. Many people don't realize there is a thing called, I think it's theta mode. And basically what that means is when we just wake up and just before we go to sleep are the two times when our brain is in a mode where it can be go under hypnosis or be reprogrammed. And that's why just before you go to bed, it's important to program your mind with the thoughts, whether you give yourself affirmations, whether you listening to meditation, something to program your mind before you go to sleep. Because if you go to sleep worrying and stressing about something, that will manifest in your dreams. Because that's the part where your subconscious is able to be affected. And the same as when you first get up. So use those times to benefit yourself and to program yourself in a positive way. Also with the mind, we have the indecisions. Should I, shouldn't I? Yes and no. We're ambivalent. We're not making decisions, we're not allowing ourselves to be proactive with things. We're allowing things to happen to us. And indecision often brings about procrastination. And then we have the negativity that seeps in. Those 70,000 thoughts, 90% of them rumination, talking about you can't, it's not going to work well, you can't do it, it's going to be bad, it's going to be scary out there. And then with that comes the hasty decisions. Action precedes thought. And then afterwards we say to ourselves, why did I do that? Then we have, in terms of the body, things like the headaches, frequent infections, taut muscles, muscular twitches, fatigue, skin irritations, and breathlessness. And the reason for that is because one of the side effects of constantly having your stress hormones being triggered, cortisol being one of them, is that cortisol actually switches off your immune system. So what that basically means is the very system that's helped is meant to be there to prevent you from having illnesses and sicknesses and stuff is being switched off by you continuously operating out of certain thoughts that trigger your stress hormone. And then we have the emotions, the lack of confidence, you know, more fussy, irritability, depression, apathy. Just it's all going to end anyway. What's the point? We have all of these kind of things that are going on when stress, which has become too high, starts to impact on us. And so it is about getting the support when you recognize and identify these things. Do not suffer in silence, because then you will just be a victim. But then we have the behavioral aspects of stress. So accident prone. If you find you're making lots of mistakes and accidents at the moment, loss of appetite. And sometimes it can go the other way. Either people stop eating or overeat, because sometimes people can become emotional eaters. Loss of sex drive, drinking more, insomnia, restlessness, and smoking more. And so these are the behavioral effects of when someone is under stress. And for me, when I think about stress, I see it as this. People become strained, they become tense, they become rigid in their thinking, in their responses, in their emotions, and in their behaviors. And they become exhausted because it's tiring. It's tiring operating out of this mode. It's tiring trying to repress all these emotions that you're feeling so people don't know you're stressed. And it's suffering in silence often. And then people feel spent. It's too much. I can't do this anymore. And that's where we get to burnout. So for people, write down what you would say is your definition of burnout. What does it mean to you? So we looked at stress, but this is one thing after stress. So what would burnout be? Don't care anymore. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. When you don't have nothing left to give. Yeah, absolutely. You stop caring. You're numb. Yeah, you can't even feel anymore. Absolutely. Emotionally bankrupt people, basically. A state where you can't bear it anymore. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is a very dark and dangerous place to be for that individual. So, burnout is a state of emotional, mental, and physical exhaustion caused by excessive and prolonged stress. Very important. Excessive and prolonged stress. It occurs when you feel overwhelmed and unable to meet constant demands. So it's not just a one-off thing, it's constant. And as the stress continues, you begin to lose the interest or motivation that led you to take on a certain role in the first place. And that could be work-wise, that could be a relationship, that could be looking after someone or caring for someone. But when we are having excessive and prolonged stress, which makes us feel overwhelmed and unable to keep those constant demands, that is where the tipping point occurs. And burnout reduces your productivity and zaps your energy, leaving you feeling increasingly helpless, hopeless, cynical, and resentful. And that's the real damage that it does. It makes you feel helpless. You feel like you can't see the sky for the trees. You feel hopeless, that there's no way of getting out of this situation. You feel cynical, can't see the positives in anything. That's when um, the survival mode kicks in. And then resentful to yourself, resentful for others, resentful when other people are not feeling the way that you're feeling. And so burnout is, we want to do everything we can to avoid burnout like the plague, because it's a very deep hole to get back out of. And this is why it's important to speak up about how you're feeling, what's going on for you, and to use the support mechanisms that are available to you.